I'm privileged. It's a privilege to be here today, to be here with Sarah and the family and your friends. And I'm privileged to be part of this. Thank you, Pastor Lolly. Thank you, Sarah. Let's take our Bibles. Let's open them up to John chapter 13. Thank you to Desiree who read it to us. This one verse. John chapter 13. Kind of thought today that there's no need for the PowerPoint because there's only one verse. We'll work our way through this one verse. And the reason I share this with you and the reason I want to share this with Sarah is I was reading this a couple of months ago, and sometimes you read over things and you just read it and it's like, wow, beautiful. And then other times you read it and you're like, just let me read that again. And you're sort of, in a way, compelled to read it again. And then, so that happened to me, and it sort of was in my mind. And a couple of weeks ago, I heard a message from this very passage, and I knew that was it. This is what I got to talk to you about. This is what I got to share today. It says, from the New King James Version this time, "Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he should depart from this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end." So first of all, we notice here that it tells us that Jesus says, or Jesus recognizes, it says he knew his hour had come. In other words, Jesus knew that it was time. That the moment had arrived, that there was something that was going to transpire now. He knew. And when we read those words, we get a sense, especially when we read through the rest of the New Testament, more so the Gospels, when we read the Gospels, you get this picture that throughout the Gospels, there are hints that Jesus knew the prophecies of the Old Testament. He knew, especially Daniel chapter 9, he knew the timeline that these prophecies prophesied about his life. And so you get the sense that throughout the Old Testament, Jesus just knew his hour had come. For example, you go to John chapter 2. If you read the story in John chapter 2, Jesus with his disciples and his family, they arrive at a wedding feast. And as they arrive at this wedding feast, around about the end of the week, this terrible thing happens to the groom and his family. They run out of wine. And for them, what was about to transpire for them as a family, the groom's family, was going to be an utterly shameful experience. And they would have to carry that experience with them for the rest of their lives because they've run out of wine. How can you run out of wine at the feast? And so Jesus' mother comes to him. Those of you who know the story, she comes to Jesus and she says to him, listen, don't you just want to perform a miracle and just help them out, please? And Jesus, there in John chapter 2, responds to his mother with the following words in verse 4. He says, "Woman, what does your concern have to do with me?" And then he says these words. He says, "My hour has not yet come." That's the clue. Do you see the clue? The clue that Jesus is aware of the prophecies about him, of the timeline of his life. His hour had not yet come. And then you just think about this. Jesus' mother, she knew him. I mean, my mom knows me. Right? My wife knows me, but my mom gave birth to me. And she knows more than my wife knows. That's just the reality. She's seen me in ways that my wife has never seen me before. Okay? And Jesus' mother knows who he is. First of all, she conversed with an angel. And then she fell pregnant without intercourse with a man. And then she gives birth to this baby that's so different from the other children. And she sees him grow up into this person. She knew that he was the Messiah. She had no doubt about it. And so you can just imagine, here she comes to Jesus and sort of at this moment, she's sort of just, you're a grown man now. You've got your disciples with you. You're about to reveal to everybody who you is. Come on, just do this one thing and let them know who you really are. You know, instead of them thinking that you're the son of a fornicator, let them see that you are the Son of God. And Jesus kind of looks at his mom and he says to her something like, Mom, you know, it's not my time. It's not my time to reveal who I am. And then a couple of chapters further, in John chapter 7, we have another story, the story of Jesus' brothers who come to him, and they say to him something like this. They say to him, listen, you know, when a man wants to be known for who he is, he doesn't go around visiting in small houses with a small band of fishermen. You know, he goes to the places where he should be seen, and he reveals himself for who he is. So if you believe that you are the Messiah, this is pretty much what they say to him. If you believe that you are the Messiah, it's time for the Feast of the Tabernacles there in John chapter 7. Then they say to him, look, hundreds and thousands of people, they're coming to Jerusalem. They're descending on the temple. Why don't you go to the temple and just reveal to them who you are? And then Jesus says to them in John chapter 7, verse 6, the following. He says, my time has not yet come. And so we see that just as in John chapter 2, just here as in John chapter 13, there's this sense that Jesus is familiar with the prophecies that outline his life. But the difference between John chapter 2 and 7 and chapter 13 is, here in chapter 13, Jesus says, my time has come. Now it's time. Now it is time. The interesting thing is when we look through the gospel, we find the story of Jesus there in Luke chapter 2. Jesus is 12 years old, and the story is about him in the temple. And, you know, his parents lose him. And they lose him for 4 days, and they find him back in the temple again. And when they find him back in the temple again, they're sort of this like, how can you dare us losing you? And Jesus says to them in a very nice way, but that maybe might have even be a little bit, well, you know, I don't know how they would have really felt. But Jesus says to them, well, you know, don't you know I was busy with my Father's business, Jesus says. And the idea we get here is that Jesus must have been walking around in that temple, and he must have seen this temple and what it stood for. And here he has this visual map of what he's been reading in the Old Testament and what he's been learning about the sanctuary service. And he walks around and he's starting to connect what his mom and his dad was teaching him and what he was reading about himself there in Isaiah. And he's seeing the rituals, and he's seeing what the priests are doing, and he sees the sacrifice, and he suddenly gets this glimpse of who he really is, and the fact that there's this responsibility that's being placed on his shoulders, and soon at some point in the future he's going to have to be the one who dies as the lamb for the world. He gets this glimpse of who he really is, and his responsibility, the responsibility that suddenly rests upon his shoulders, and this mission that he has to save humanity. And every human being that's ever lived, you and I, and even those who will come after us, if he fails, we're doomed. What a responsibility. I mean, my responsibility now is nothing compared to this. And so then the next thing we read is in Luke chapter 3. Just think about this. In Luke chapter 2, Jesus is 12, and in Luke chapter 3, Jesus is suddenly 30 years old. What happened to the 18 years? And you get the sense that in Luke chapter 12, Jesus puts two and two together. He sees who he really is. He gets this glimpse of what's to come and his responsibility. And then he goes away, and for 18 years, he prepares for this responsibility. And then we see him there in Luke chapter 3, 30 years old, and he begins his earthly ministry. And here in John chapter 13, Jesus is 3.5 years into his ministry. 3.5 years into his ministry, and suddenly the time has come. It's the moment of truth. It's the moment that the universe has been waiting for. It's the moment that he ended up preparing his whole life for. Now, would you agree with me if I say that this is probably the most important time or point in history? Would you agree with me? You can talk back to me this morning. It's okay. Would you agree with me? Yes or no? Is this important? In fact, just to say that it is important is kind of like it doesn't really capture the essence and the importance. I mean, you have musicians. Thank you very much for playing that so beautifully. You have musicians trying to write about what it means to surrender all to Jesus because of what He's done for us. You have poets who write about it. You have authors who write about it. And people die for this. You have people who are willing to go to the grave for this. And yet every time we read and every time we sing and every time we see with people's commitment to this, it's sort of like at the end, it doesn't really, it still comes short of really grasping the importance of this. I mean, this is it. This is, if Jesus fails in this moment, if He is tempted in this hour, at this time, your life and my life is worth nothing. So, Sarah, if the Bible is true, and if Jesus is who He really says He is, then this is the most important time in history. Okay? The most important time. It's the moment of truth. Let me ask you a question. How many of you, and I'm asking this question because I'm going to be a little bit confessional to you this morning. How many of you like to be interrupted when you're doing something really important? Well, that's it. That says a lot. I have to be honest. I don't like it. I don't like to be interrupted, but I can tell you my wife doesn't like it even more than me. And she's not here this morning. She's a little ill. She's not here to defend herself, so I'm going to have a go at this. And I'll just have to take it afterwards. She has this way. She has this amazing way. And when she's busy with something that's really important to her and you sort of interrupt her, she has this way of sort of acknowledging that you're interrupting her with this sort of half a yes, I'm interested, half a smile that says you shouldn't be interrupting me, and this sort of the sigh that it's all together. It has this. I can't express this to you, but you just know, and sort of you sort of know I'm going to go and I'm coming. I'm going to interrupt you, and I know that you just sort of you just know it's going to happen, And sometimes when it's not that important, it's just the sort of the yes, with the yes. Sort of smile kind of thing. But then sometimes when she's really busy with important stuff, then it's sort of the yes, the smile, and sort of what is it kind of as well. So, when it's really important, you say, and you interrupt her, and she goes like, what's it? And then I know. So it's not even worth asking. I've gone over, I've stepped over. Actually, I'm worse than her. I really am worse than her. I remember when the children were really small, especially Sabbath mornings. You got to understand, I'm important. And I'm doing important stuff, and in my mind, it just shows you how skew we can view ministry, how skew we can view ourselves. And, I had this perception of, I'm important. I'm the pastor of the church. I got to make sure that I'm on time at church. And for me, on time was like 30 minutes early. I got to be on time at church. For my wife, being on time at church is being on time. It's like if the service starts at 9:45, it's 9:45 for her, And so for me, I had this skew idea that if I don't go to church and I don't get there really early, then what's going to happen is everybody is going to lose their eternity. I really got to get there on time, I got to get there. And then you come to sort of 9:30, and she's still doing her makeup and her hair, and I would go to the car. I'd say, I'll see you in the car. Go to the car, wait in the car. You sort of work up, and then when she gets in the car, I've got to pretend that everything's fine. I'm not angry. I'm not upset that we're going to be late, and the church is going to lose their eternal salvation because of that, But let me say this. Let me just be honest, that I confess, and she knows this, that The reason we were always late is because I was so wrapped up in what I thought was so important that I was unable to see the necessities of the mundane things that had to be done in order for us to be on time. Like maybe if I helped feeding the kids or getting them dressed, maybe we would have been on time. And we all kind of have this problem, don't we? At times that we think that, we really get mad when we are driven, when we have these small impediments that sort of force their way into our lives and call us away from the so-called important things that we think we should be doing in life, or that we are doing in life. And this is what we see here in John chapter 13. Just think about this. Jesus' hour has come. And this is the most important hour in the timeline of history. If Jesus fails here, as I said before, Jesus fails us. And if Jesus fails, humanity's doomed. This is the most important time of what's happening. What's happening in this very hour? If you read Luke chapter 22, which is the companion passage to John chapter 13, Jesus is having the Passover meal with his disciples. In fact, he's having that very meal that typifies, that symbolizes what he's just about to go and do on the cross. And what's the disciples doing? Oh man, they are so wrapped up in their own arrogance and their own pride and their own position jostling that they just are not in the same moment as Jesus. They don't see it. And so just picture it. Most important time. He's been spending 3.5 years with his disciples, developing them trying to make them into his likeness so that he can grow his kingdom through them. And they're more concerned about worldly glory, positions of power, and positions of superiority. I can just do it. If it was me, gone. Next group, let's work with you. Put yourself in Jesus' shoes. What would you have done, Sarah? I said, that's it. If you had 12 Davids, no, I'm joking. What would you have done? Just put yourself in Jesus' shoes. You are the infinite God of the universe, embodied in the flesh. Embodied in the flesh. You are about to save the universe. You have lived the most disciplined life that humanity can imagine. You were tempted in every way as every human being, and yet you never sinned. You've spent all these years working on these individuals, this ragtag bunch of guys, and this is the condition they're in. Revealed. Just think about when that reveals itself to Jesus in the moment, in his most important moment, the hour of need, just before he's about to go to the cross. This is what he sees. He's got to go to the cross with knowing these are the guys that the kingdom of God depends on. And then we read in John chapter 13, verse 1. We read this last part of that verse says, having loved his own who were in the world, he what? He loved them to the end. He loved them until the end. So Jesus' disciples are not where they ought to be. They're not nearly where they should be spiritually, morally, emotionally. They are not there, yet Jesus still stops in his hour. In his time, he stops to attend to them. What a lesson for us to learn. Zara, this is an important lesson. These things that we think are so important in our lives, the things that we go about. We have families, and we have friends, and we have neighbors, and we have a community. And sometimes even in those most important hours, you just have to stop. We have to stop and attend to those mundane things because they're not where they ought to be. And sometimes as parents, as leaders, or whatever we are, we get so bogged down with those things that are so-called so important to us. And so when the hour comes, we don't even have time for those that God has committed to us. So listen up, listen up. This morning, God commits Sarah to you. Will you allow her to interrupt you? And she represents her friends here as well. Will you allow them to interrupt you? One more lesson? Is that okay? One more lesson? One more lesson. Just think this through with me. One more lesson. Here's Jesus. He's the embodiment of God of the universe. If you want to know anything about who God is, if you want to know anything about the kingdom of light, anything about the kingdom of eternity, anything about the kingdom of life, if you want to know anything about that, all you have to do is look at Jesus. You look at the life of Jesus. If you want to know anything about the character of God, if you want to know anything about the essential nature of God, all you have to do is look at the life of Jesus Christ. And here you have these disciples. They've walked with him for so long, for 3.5 years. Here he is, Jesus, at his hour. He was born for this moment. The plan of salvation was decided for this moment. And here you are, and at this very moment, you are, just imagine yourself as one of these disciples. At this very moment, all you can care about is being better than Peter. Better than Peter. Now, I was baptized about just under 30 years ago. But it feels like yesterday. And every time somebody goes through the water, and even today, it's going to feel like to me, like it's me. And so I thank you for that. Thank you for doing that for us all here this morning who's been baptized before. But I remember I was baptized about 30 years ago. And here's the thing. And hopefully some of you can resonate with this, because even now, there are times where I find myself and I'm frustrated. And I'm upset and angry at myself for still being so superficial and sometimes childish in who I am as a person and my faith. And I'm just thinking, if I was Jesus and this was Jacques, Jacques, man, you've interrupted me one last time. I've had enough. Haven't you learned by now? And Jesus, this is the comfort in this passage. This is the assurance in this very passage. Jesus says to his disciples, he says, you've been with me for 3.5 years. Jacques, you've given your life to me almost 30 years ago. And yes, most of the time you can still be childish in your faith. But I'm going to love you till the end. And I will let you interrupt me. And I will love you. Why? Because that's who I am. Jesus didn't love his disciples till the end because of who they are. He loved them because of who he is. He didn't love them when it was easy and convenient and when they were lovable. I'm not sure that they were lovable most of the time, but Jesus didn't. It wasn't important to him he loved them because of who he is, because of his nature, because he is love. And so, Sarah, there are people here this morning who are wondering whether God still loves them. And there are going to be times as you continue to grow and you continue to mature in life, there are going to be times where you wonder, does God still love me? And I just want to say to you, he promises he will love you till the end. I wonder if I may make this more about us as we close off. I wonder how many marriages could have been saved if husband and wife loved each other until the end. I wonder how many relationships would be reconciled if we would love each other until the end. Can you imagine the powerful hub of this community of faith if we love each other until the end? Till the end. Don't just love because it's convenient to love. You know, Jesus, when he decided to love, it cost him his life. He bled for that love. He was in pain for that love. And so Jesus calls you and me to love like that. And that means that at times that love will be painful. It might even cost us our lives. Think of those in Sri Lanka. It cost them their lives. And so today, by going through that grave of water, Sarah is saying to all of you today that she has decided to give her life to Christ, that he can rule it as he sees fit for her. And by doing so, she commits herself to this community of faith, this family of faith. And so Jean-Marc, Saint-Souris, love each other until the end. And love Sarah and David until the end. Elders, deacons, deaconesses, leaders, members, love each other until the end. Because as she grows up, she will see her mom and dad interact with each other. And she will see how you interact with each other, and she will see how you interact with her, and that will tell her a lot about how much you love her. So I encourage you and challenge you. Love each other until the end, just as Jesus totally, fully committedly loves you and me until the end. God bless you.